Lightning rod. Oof. Where to begin? Bro, you are such a world-class coaster with elite airtime. But wow, what the fuck happened here? The only launched wooden coaster is neither launched nor wooden anymore, because you are always closed for months, and even when you're open, you constantly break down. It got so bad that Dollywood had to strip down the ride into a completely different version. But why was Lightning Rod so problematic to the point where they had to change its integrity? This is why Lightning Rod was constantly closed. Several months ago, we made an episode revolving around a coaster at Missouri's Silver Dollar City. This park in the woods is one of the best due to its amazing atmosphere and Ozark theming. Well, in 1976, Hershend, Silver Dollar City's parent company, purchased a tourist trap in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee called Gold Rush. Previously known as Rebel Railroad and Gold Rush Junction, this was previously themed to both the Civil War and the Old Wild West. Hershend restructured the whole park to be Silver Dollar City, just like the original in Missouri. Similar to its sister park, this would be themed to a rustic village in the mountains. Tennessee's Silver Dollar City would receive similar investments to their sister park for the next 10 years. This included a new dark ride coaster in 1978 called Blazing Fury. No, this isn't a criminal page, not that Blazing Fury, like what the actual fuck? This is instead an in-house dark ride that uses a roller coaster system built by the park itself. This is themed to taking out an out-of-control fire in a town. This is such a classic dark ride coaster, even if it's a little dated, but the park would change forever in 1986. Do you guys know Dolly Parton, the famous singer-songwriter from Tennessee known for her country music? She grew up near the place and was interested in owning the park, so she and Hershend agreed to be joint partners in running the park. As part of this deal, Tennessee's Silver Dollar City was rebranded as Dollywood. Thank gosh they changed the name, because having both parks with the same name would have been the theme park equivalent to the Goliath dilemma. The other thing is that new investment would come at a blitzing pace. This includes, but is not limited to, the last aero looper ever built in Tennessee Tornado, an underrated GCI Woody in Thunderhead, the first Gerstlauer Eurofighter in America in Mystery Mine, the first B&M Wing coaster in America in Wild Eagle, and a very fun Gerstlauer family coaster in Fire Chaser Express. Somewhere between when Wild Eagle and Fire Chaser Express opened, back at Silver Dollar City came a new prototype. In 2013, Outlaw Run opened at Silver Dollar City. This was the prototype RMC Topper Track wooden coaster. This is something you'd expect from Hershend because they're known for adding risky prototypes like Outlaw Run. The Topper Track worked by replacing the top section of wood with laminated steel beams, but it still keeps the bottom 6 layers of wood. This allows the Woody to stay wooden while having more extreme elements. This was evident in Outlaw Run, featuring ejector airtime hills, sometimes in a sideways direction, and 3 different inversions. Most notably, the double barrel roll at the end of the ride that gives glorious whip and hang time. Outlaw Run, while short, was elite and mighty impressive considering this was RMC's first ground-up coaster. On top of that, this was RMC's second ever project after the ambitious New Texas Giant conversion, and that's on top of brand new trains that would first appear on this coaster. Many claim to be elite and punchy for a wooden coaster, making it one of the best Woodies. This showed great success for both Hershend and RMC. With Outlaw Run, they wanted a similar coaster to come to Dollywood. This is because the coaster lineup at both parks tend to line up with similar treatment. Almost as much as the treatment the whole class is gonna get after realizing they're fucked from that Blazing Fury incident. But Hershend being Hershend, they wanted a first of its kind for Dollywood's next Woody. However, Hershend's second RMC would be quite the problematic experience. Planning for the new coaster would commence in 2014. After blowing away Hershend with Outlaw Run, RMC was quickly brought on board with this new project. With Hershend's ambitious mindset, they wanted another first of its kind for their parks. Soon after the project started, Dollywood brought up the idea of a wooden coaster. But not just any wooden coaster, mostly because Thunderhead already exists. No, they wanted RMC to put a launch on a wooden coaster. RMC was intrigued by the idea and began began looking into their options. One early idea was a high-speed cable lift similar to the one used on El Toro, but faster. While this idea was promising, Herschend pushed for a crazier method. The idea was to use a full-on magnetic launch. RMC was intrigued by this idea, but Herschend brought more suggestions to the table. At first, RMC looked into their steel iBox track for the ride, but Dollywood was more interested in their topper track. Pretty much the only difference was that the iBox was full steel, while the topper track still had layers of wood. The reason Dollywood insisted on using the topper track is because they wanted to market it as the first launch wooden coaster. Like that decision isn't gonna come back to bite them in the ass. After participating in off-road dune driving to demonstrate an uphill launch, RMC secured the bid with Dollywood. As for the location of the ride, Dollywood was aiming for a large hill with a complex terrain behind it. Initially, RMC officials were nervous about working on complicated terrain, but after analyzing the terrain, RMC determined the location would make for an exciting layout. The most interesting thing is that most of the new Woody would be mostly hidden from park guests, with the exception of the launch and second half. To get a good view of the first half behind the hill, you either need backstage access or be somewhere in a remote location. With everything set on course, Dollywood announced the new addition as Lightning Rod on August 7th, 2015. What the fuck? No, this has nothing to do with metal sticks you shove into your roof. This would be the first and only launched wooden coaster. This coaster was part of Dollywood's $300 million expansion that included this, along with both Wild Eagle and Fire Chaser Express. Lightning Rod would be placed in the Jukebox Junction land near the front of the park. The coaster is themed to a 50s hot rod in order to fit with the land. The ride experience would be as followed. Passengers board the 24-rider trains and pull down their famous RMC lap bars. The ride begins with a right-hand turn into the launch. Then you initiate the LSM launch. This launch would be powered by a large bank of capacitors in the main building. The LSMs required 1.1 megawatts of power to catapult each train. The launch would propel you uphill at 45 miles per hour or 72 kilometers per hour. While this doesn't sound as fast as you think, keep in mind you're launching uphill. This means you need to overcome gravity to get up to speed. This results in strong positive G-forces from the launch. Then you crest this hill and enter a small dip into another hill. Now what's interesting is that the elevation difference for the coaster is 206 feet or 63 meters. This would technically make it the tallest Woody and be the only one to be hyper heights. But no one calls it a hyper coaster because the height difference is due to the elevation of the mountain it sits on, meaning in actuality, the tallest peak is only 80 feet or 24 meters off the ground. This is where you descend the 165-foot, 50-meter drop at a 73-degree angle. At the bottom, you reach the top speed of 73 miles per hour or 117 kilometers per hour. This makes it the fastest wooden coaster in operation. The first element after the drop is the wave turn to the left. This element is similar to a cross of an airtime hill and an overbank turn, but the banking is at a 90-degree angle. This element ejects riders in a sideways direction that is very sustained. Next is a twist and shout to the right. This is similar to the wave turn, but the banking is in the opposite direction of where the track is turning. Then you hit a smaller twist and shout and then a double up with sustained air. This directs you into the main standout of Lightning Rod, the quad down. This element is 4 downward dips all back to back, so you rapidly pop out of your seat repeatedly with solid ejector. Then you have one more downward dip and then this big turnaround into the brakes. This completes 3,800 feet, 1,200 meters of track. Lightning Rod is perfection in many ways. The launch is not only unique, but because it's uphill, the yank is forceful. Then the main layout is filled to the brim with ejector airtime that launches you out of your seat, especially at the quad down that rapidly pops you up. At a cost of $22 million, this would be the largest investment Dollywood would make at the time. This was anticipated to be one of the best roller coasters in the world. With all the hype, Dollywood opened Lightning Rod on opening day 2016. Wait a minute, where on earth are the reviews? Hold on, give me 1 second.
Hello?
Hey Jason, would you be able to run to Dollywood to get Lightning Rod reviews?
Yeah, sure, just give me a few minutes. Alright, I'm at Dollywood and heading to Lightning Rod, but...
But what? What's the issue?
There's almost no activity near the ride and, oh shit.
What happened?
The ride's freaking closed with no one in sight.
What the hell? It's fucking July! Ask what's going on.
Excuse me, sir, do you know why this coaster is closed?
So as you know, Lightning Rod is one of the most unreliable coasters out there. The coaster struggles to stay open consistently. The rod keeps faulting and causing it to be shut down for hours before it could get back up. That's if Lightning Rod can even manage to open that day. For multiple days or even months on end, Lightning Rod will be sitting dormant with no signs of reopening. And even when it's open, the coaster often quickly faults and shuts down. The amount of times it takes for L-Rod to break down is quicker than it takes for a Redditor to make a conversation awkward. Dollywood struggled to get Lightning Rod running as the coaster threw one tantrum after another. The only coaster I can think of that is more broken than this is Top Thrill Dragster, and that is a whole other can of worms to cover another day. If you tried to ride it in its early years, you know how difficult it was to get on. You ask enthusiasts who rode it, they said it took multiple visits to Dollywood to finally get on it. It's almost like the coaster thinks enthusiasts are the type of people where if you walk into a frat party, all the hoes suddenly disappear. Now that's what you call an L-Rod. And it was even worse if you expect it to open and it never did, cause at that point, your balls are now more blue than the sky, and I know exactly how frustrating it must have been. Do you guys remember the Steel Curtain episode from a few months ago? Well, if you did, you know that in the middle of the video, me and my dumbass friends made a skit of some coaster enthusiasts trying to ride it, but it kept having problems. By the way, I am not making another one of those. That last one took way too long to make. But the scenario happening in that skit, the same thing happened to Lightning Rod, where you have people constantly lingering around Lightning Rod waiting to ride it in between breakdowns. To understand why, let's examine the culprit of the problem, the LSM launch. By default, launch coasters are more complicated than chain lifts due to the complex programming, but LSM launches as of late have been fairly reliable by launch standards. But what you need to keep in mind is that most companies who specialize in magnetic launches don't actually make the launches themselves. Instead, they outsource the manufacturing process to a German company called Intrasys. Intrasys is known for making LSM launches for a lot of coasters from Mach, Gerstlauer, and Vekoma, or in Intamin's case, in DriveTech. RMC didn't have the resources to produce its own launch, but instead of hiring Intrasys, they approached Pennsylvania-based Velocity Magnets. While Velocity did work on electromagnets, they mostly focus on braking systems. They have never built a magnetic launch before, and this would be their first try, which is the most ironic thing possible. But since they worked with magnets, combined with the fact they've been working on braking systems on Dollywood's other rides, they had more resources to build a launch. Given the fact this launch was made by inexperienced people while being tested on a wood-based ride, this launch was littered with technical issues right from the get-go. This first caused Lightning Rod to get delayed months from March to June 13th, 2016. Yay! It broke 5 days later. Fuck! So not even a week after it opened, Lightning Rod closed again due to a part recall. The ride reopened later that month. However, the coaster was placed under technical rehearsal. This means the ride was only open sporadically and on other days would be periodically closed for maintenance. Dollywood was essentially saying that the coaster was extremely temperamental and that not everyone would get to ride it. Lightning Rod then became fully operational that September, but that's not really saying much. Trying to ride Lightning Rod in 2016 is the equivalent of quitting an addiction after consuming a 12-pack of beer and grass. It's difficult to accomplish those goals. For the remainder of 2016, Lightning Rod was constantly closed for maintenance and soon gained a reputation for its unreliability. A lot of the times, the coaster would be seen testing only to not even open for the day. This is because the coaster had to perform repeated test runs successfully in order to open it for the day. Sometimes issues would occur right after it opened, where after 2 to 3 cycles, the train would roll back after a failed launch. Geez, the launch was by far causing the biggest issues. Sometimes the launch would overheat, while other times would encounter an error to cause a failed launch. And since it's launched upwards, it requires far more power to overcome gravity. This isn't one of those examples where whipping it with the leather belt will fix the problem. However, the issues with Lightning Rod would be more problematic in the winter. Dollywood is located right in the mountains where it gets cold as shit. Not only can it valley, but the contractions of parts can throw errors. And God forbid if it snows during your visit, because it's going to take days before the coaster reopens. This is because the location on a hillside makes it harder for sunlight to reach there. So if it snows, the process of melting it takes an eternity to clear. So riding Lightning Rod in the winter is like buying fresh greens in the back alleyways of Compton, California, because it's a large gamble on whether you succeed or get fucked over by the narcs. Needless to say, 2016 was a rather rough time for Dollywood. Lightning Rod was practically closed half the time, which frustrated Dollywood so much. Anytime the coaster pulls out the "sorry we're closed" sign, it's like pulling up in those ugly ass hoodies. That sign tells everyone I'm musty as hell, I don't get any me, hoes, bully me, please. Especially when you consider that every other coaster in this park is very reliable. Aside from this, I've never seen or heard of a coaster closed here. And it didn't help that another problematic issue started rearing its ugly head. While the launch played a big factor in its downtime, another problem started to arise. That's the major structural issues of Lightning Rod. That's right, the coaster was suffering from a broken structure. Structural issues come from the track experiencing too much stress, causing it to break. For being a new coaster, it's weird the structure is already starting to crack. But as it turns out, the structure cannot properly handle the forces of L-Rod. Before you say it, no, the structure was not built shit. Unlike your goofy ass who couldn't even cook eggs without burning your whole house or school down. The issue was that Lightning Rod's forces were causing the track to wear down faster than expected. By nature, wood coasters are much weaker than steel coasters, which means the forces can't be too much. But with Lightning Rod's unique track, the forces, more so the airtime, are much stronger than most. But there's a rumor that Lightning Rod was running faster than designed, way faster than the advertised 73 miles per hour. So with much higher speeds and stronger G-forces, they caused the track to experience more stress than intended. This led to accelerated wear and tear on the track. Excessive strain on the track not only leads to downtime, it also reduces the coaster's service life. This was especially problematic with the hill following the launch, when the train slammed up on the track. While this provided great air, the slamming of the track was too hard, causing that section of track to decay much faster than the computer that has the resolutions of a f***ing potato. Now, Dollywood, as of right now, has no plans of chucking L-Rod into the dumpster. That means the maintenance cost to fix the ride is screwing Dollywood's wallet over. This coaster may have single-handedly killed the RMC topper track. Even though the topper track was a great model, only 4 were ever produced. And since L-Rod's dilemma, RMC has stayed clear of the topper track and has since used their all-steel iBox track for ground-up creations. And I haven't even mentioned the supports causing all those faults on the launch. See, for LSM launches to function, they require almost exact precision, so the launch fins on the track has to align precisely with the gaps of the magnets on the train. However, the issue with Lightning Rod is that the LSMs are built on a wooden structure. If you know anything about woodies, you know they have to flex and shake under moving trains. So if the supports flex underneath the launch, this can cause the fins to be misaligned with the track. This can throw an error in the system and cause the ride to be shut down. This downtime frustrates both the park and the guests because nobody can even use it. So they treat the downtime the same way they treat the teacher's pet in school. Annoying as hell, and you just want to punch them in the face. With these major monkey wrenches thrown on the Woody, they had to think of solutions to fix the coaster. So here's what they did. The first was slowing down the launch. Contrary to popular belief, a trim was not placed after the launch. Instead, the launch would cut off sooner so that you aren't flying on that hill. That was to slow the speed down and in turn, reduce the strain on the structure. They also modified the trains to make them lighter. What they did was to replace the big zero car on the front of the train with a lighter one. This was following the permanent removal of a trunk element on the back of the train years prior. Sometimes the coaster would operate without a zero car. Meanwhile, a nasty pothole formed at the base of the first drop. This pothole caused the riders to suddenly jolt violently. Apparently, the trains were hitting the valley so hard that a lot of wear and tear happened on that spot. If you ever ran over a pothole at 70 miles per hour, you know that is scary as hell, because the sudden jolt will feel like you're running a vehicle into the Mexican border. On top of that, potholes can damage the wheels and undercarriage of a train. This is an issue that plagues topper tracks because Outlaw Run also has a pothole at the base of its first drop. It got so bad that Dollywood closed Lightning Rod for a few months in 2018 to address issues unrelated to the launch. While the pothole was gone, problems persisted. It was extremely difficult to get on Lightning Rod and was completely up to chance. You either needed to do a lot of planning or get extremely lucky. Eventually, all would come to a point in September 2020. That month, Dollywood closed Lightning Rod yet again. Oh brother, not again! However, this time it did not reopen for the rest of the season. The only sign of plans was this sign that stated RMC was cooking something up. We would remain in the dark on L-Rod's progress until mid-November, and this period of time royally pisses me off. Not because the maintenance and PR team were rednecks who couldn't operate Windows 95. No, my beef with this closure in September was that this was when I visited Dollywood. That's right, I was one of those that went to the park and never got on. Back in late October 2020, I went on a family vacation with my parents to Gatlinburg and decided to visit Dollywood. Yes, I actually have parents who are both alive and not deadbeat, unlike yours who's either dead, imprisoned, or went to go get the milk. Now by this point, Elrod has been AWOL for a month, so I already knew I wouldn't get to ride no matter what. But because Dollywood was a bucket list park, we decided to go anyways. Now Dollywood all around was a fantastic park. I love the atmosphere, the food, the operations, and the other coasters were solid. However, when I left, I felt they were missing that standout coaster. And while I think Thunderhead is an underrated GCI Woody, that is nowhere close to being a standout. And I'm sure Lightning Rod would have filled that void. While I was still disappointed, mostly because this would have been my first RMC, I wasn't that salty because I knew I'd be back someday. Not only was Dollywood such a great park, but I definitely did not get the full experience. On top of Big Bear Mountain opening since then, I'm still missing half the credits there. And most offensively, I never even got to try their cinnamon bread. Hey, in my defense, I barely researched the park, so I didn't even know what those were at the time. But for some reason, I thought I'd be back within a couple of years. Well, 4 years later, I still have not gone back. And since my visit, they changed the ride so much that it isn't even the same one as the one I saw. The first was put into place 3 weeks after my visit. They would replace 57% of the topper track with RMC's all-steel iBox track, so Lightning Rod became the first and only RMC to get RMC'd. Oh, look at that, Hershen's decision for topper track came back to bite them in the The wood issues were so problematic that Dollywood went back to replace some sections with steel. The sections that have steel are the launch, the following drop, and the entire second half starting at the double up. Dollywood hoped this change would improve the ride's uptime. However, they did have to give up the record for the fastest wood coaster, because half the layout is steel while the first half stayed wooden, making this a first true hybrid coaster. However, because more than half of the track was iBox, this technically classifies it as a steel coaster. As a result, the record for the fastest wood coaster went to Goliath at Illinois Six Flags Great America, another RMC topper track that has a rather short layout. With the new track, Lightning Rod reopened for the 2021 season. For the most part, the ride experience did not change. The layout did not receive any form of reprofiling or modifications. The only thing that did change was that it's smoother now. Since there's no rough patch, there is no discomfort to be found. Plus, since over half the track is steel, they wouldn't need to worry about unspecified track issues. Now, Lightning Rod overall would be open more often and not have to close for months. Unfortunately, the goal to eliminate most of the downtime was about as effective as a vegan protest outside of KFC, because even without Elrod's extensive closures, the launch still keeps blowing a fuse. Every so often, the launch would just abort mission and fail to launch. When this happened, the trains would roll back to the base of the launch. Then the operators would need to evacuate all the riders. Once that's completed, the coaster then needs to run several repeated test cycles to reopen for the day. At minimum, this would cause a 20 to 30 minute delay each time this happened. It also didn't help that Lightning Rod has been running at reduced capacity. What I haven't yet mentioned was that Elrod has a tendency to run just one train. This is meant to reduce stress levels since trains aren't being dispatched as often, but as I mentioned in my Steel Curtain episode, running a major headliner like this is horrible for a park as popular as Dollywood. What ends up happening is that the line grows to multi-hour waits that move at the pace of a snail. Lightning Rod's capacity was already bad because the operations tended to be on the slower side. This is due to the RMC lap bars found on all their post-2013 non-Raptor coasters. These lap bars are extremely heavy, which makes them hard to check, and that's on top of seat belts that have to be checked separately. And it doesn't help that RMCs in general are not built to handle fat people, probably because one of them would just eat up the track. So the dispatches take even longer if a pork chop gets denied. So with crap dispatches on one train operations, the slow line was a breaking point for everyone's mental sanity. The reason Elrod is still a problematic coaster to ride is that despite the heavy changes, it still doesn't address the main culprit. That's the flexing wood structure underneath the launch. While the launch track is steel, the supports are still wood because, well, let's be for real, nobody replaces a structure with a new one unless absolutely necessary. This is because replacing a whole structure for an existing coaster costs way too much money for what it's worth. I've mentioned before that retracking steel coasters are rare because of the cost. Replacing a whole structure section is even more rare due to the additional cost, especially in this scenario where you have to replace a whole launch track with brand new material. But by keeping it wood, the flexing continues to throw the fins into misalignment, causing faults. Those sways these make it impossible to achieve the necessary tolerance consistently. Now, stiffing the structure to reduce sway is not the solution. We previously learned that if a woody doesn't flex consistently, it tears itself to shreds and gets horrifically rough. So without proper maintenance, the ride experience could feel like an earthquake that could cause the whole thing to collapse at any moment. At this point, it's 2023. Dollywood has spent 7 frustrating years doing their best to keep it open regularly, and I'm pretty sure they've now spent more money to fix it compared to when they first purchased it, and it still has the reliability of a McDonald's ice cream machine. Dollywood was getting desperate since they still wanted to keep the launch as its X factor. However, Dollywood has poured so much money into a broken piece of shit that eventually it would be broken beyond repair. So with one last resort, Dollywood had to pull the plug on its most unique aspect. In September 2023, Dollywood announced the LSM launch would be scrapped in favor of a chain lift. While some people were disappointed, most people saw this coming from 2 continents away. At this point, it's been 7 years since the coaster opened, but every day, it seemed like Elrod kept throwing one L after another. If you have a problem you need to fix, you need to get rid of the source and put a new one in. So most people weren't surprised when they announced the launch would be no more. The interesting thing is that despite the loss of speed, the rest of the layout should remain the same. The thing is that the 73 miles per hour or 117 kilometers per hour speed should remain the same, but chain lifts are slower than launches, so how would this be possible? It's important to note that the top speed isn't reached from the launch, it achieves it from the base of the drop. The actual launching speed is 45 miles per hour or 72 kilometers per hour, but the more important thing to note is that remember, the launch cuts off way before you crest the peak, meaning in actuality, the train is moving slowly at the peak. The speed you cruise on the 2 hills is reportedly at 13 miles per hour or 21 kilometers per hour, so the chain lift should be running at 13 miles per hour. Once you crest the drop, the layout should be the same lightning rod we all know and well. While this change undeniably loses a big part of its identity, most would agree this was for the better. As Dollywood executives claim, innovation is very complex. When trying to build something one of a kind, problems are going to arise. I appreciate Dollywood and RMC's ambition to create something extremely unique, but with new prototypes come new challenges, which is something that is expected with prototypes. Just look at Dragster/Top Thrill 2. That coaster has been nothing but headaches for Cedar Point, and with Dollywood's case, they ended up having a big mess on their hands, and that is why they went with a high-speed chain lift. Launch Lightning Rod officially closed on October 30th, 2023, and just like that, the launch wooden coaster became extinct. I don't know if we'll ever see another launched Woody again. I'm unsure if RMC will make a similar coaster again. As I said, after the Elrod fiasco, RMC discontinued the topper track due to added track issues, especially when their iBox models don't have the same issues. So if they ever built another launch coaster, this would be used on their hybrid coasters. But I'm not sure if RMC is willing to build their own launch. See, before Elrod, RMC had previously hired outside companies to aid in the supplies of their coasters. But after the damage is done with Lightning Rod, RMC now builds everything in-house. So if someone contacts them for a launch, they would build it themselves. But a launch Woody may be possible in the future. Thunderhead manufacturer GCI have stated that their Infinity Flyer trains can handle launches, and I'm sure the Titan track and steel structure is capable of achieving the same precision needed for a launch. But they need more time to tweak the Infinity Flyers. Right now, the only coaster using these is Zambezi Zinger at Missouri's Worlds of Fun, and from what I heard, they suck. They're rather tight and feel like you got stuck in a locker by some goofy ass Disney Channel bully. So the Infinity Flyers need to cook longer in the oven before they're ready to launch. Okay, it's been 10 months since Elrod closed and 5 months since Elrod reopened. Let's check back in at Dollywood to see how the new chain lift is running. Well, Lightning Rod looks weird now crawling to the apex. This chain lift uses RMC's standard lift, which means it's loud as f***. Take a listen. It's so loud, if someone were to commit GTA or COD in real life while the coaster's running, you wouldn't be able to hear the gunshots from the anti-rollbacks. Now luckily, the coaster is still running just like how it did in 2021, which means great ejector on a mountainside. One thing to note is that for this major mod, they had to get new trains for this. The originals were built with a launch in mind, so they were a lot heavier. These new trains are presumably lighter to reduce stress, and from what I heard, the uptime has been solid with way less downtime than before. This This is really good cause it means their goal to maximize uptime was achieved. With the coaster open more often, more guests will get to ride it and Dollywood won't have to pour so much into maintenance. So hopefully, this is the last time Dollywood has to perform a major mod to Lightning Rod. But you know what boggles me the most about this story? RMC and Hershend still works together. Obviously, Hershend had RMC do most of the Lightning Rod fixes. But most people thought other than that, Hershend cut ties with RMC because of what's been happening at Dollywood. This was apparent when Hershend's other park, Wild Adventures, closed their CCI Woody, Cheetah. Instead of RMCing it like what everyone else wanted, they gutted the whole thing in favor of a restaurant. Wow, what a way of saying, I don't like you. You're the park equivalent to a bag of potatoes. But around the time Lightning Rod 4.0 opened, since at this point L-Rod went through 4 variants, Silver Dollar City opened another RMC prototype called Fire in the Hole! Damn it, AI! This isn't a bathroom joke. Wrong fire in the hole. Not again. What the hell? This RMC prototype would be a unique dark ride to replace their old Fire in the Hole. This coaster was a risky one. RMC has never built a dark ride coaster like this with heavy theming, especially with the new 3-bench trains used. And that's on top of the $30 million price tag. Yeah, you heard that right. $30 million. That's how much a B&M Giga cost. But I heard that ride is doing fairly well. But Lightning Rod isn't the last topper track you'll be seeing. Remember how I said RMC only produced 4 topper tracks? The last one opened 2 weeks after Lightning Rod did in Wildfire at Sweden's Kolmården. This random zoo in the middle of nowhere built the world's tallest wooden coaster. Wildfire has an excellent layout that sits on the side of a mountain. However, Wildfire almost closed forever years ago because the government was forcing Kolmården to shut it down and potentially demolish it. Bruh, you fucking kidding me? Again? We already went through this with a different RMC, and you're telling me it happened again? Thankfully, it still lives on today. But why the heck did the government have to be heads and create beef with Wildfire? Well, that is a story for another day. Thank you all so much for watching this mega video. This video is part of my series where we dive into roller coasters and other amusement rides history and dynamics. Since you watched to the end, be a homie and do these tasks shown on screen. That way, it convinces the YouTube algorithm to push this content to more potential viewers. And it gives me more motivation since these episodes keep getting longer and longer. Finally, I have a playlist of other episodes in this series and other videos YouTube recommends. This is the Coaster Flood, riding out.